Hey everyone, this is Jamison. We just wanted to give you a heads up that there were some technical difficulties with the video from our participants for the first 35 minutes of this presentation, of this panel discussion. After that 35 minutes, everything goes back to normal. Before then, you're just going to see still frame images of each of the participants while they're talking. However, the audio throughout this is great, and this is a wonderful conversation, and we hope you really enjoy learning more about fastest known times. Thanks a lot. Hello everyone, this is Jamison Swift with Upper Midwest Trail Runners, and we know that 2020 has been a dramatic year. For those of us in trail running, a lot of our events have gotten canceled, a lot of the regular get-togethers that we have aren't happening, and so we know it's been kind of a tough year and a kind of a different year for everyone, but we still wanted to do something special at the end of the year, similar to our yearly potluck banquet. Obviously, a potluck banquet in COVID times is not something we want to do, but we wanted to still have our panel discussion because we feel that that's always a fun and important time of our gathering as a community. And so tonight we're going to be chatting with three amazing people about the topics of FKTs, fastest known times, and trail running. And so we're going to introduce them for a moment. Before I do that, though, I just want to put in a plug that Upper Midwest Trail Runners is a regional trail running advocacy organization based mostly in Minnesota and Western Wisconsin. And we do some fat asses throughout the year. We have kind of a friendly competition that we do. We also sponsor the Gnarly Bandit series, which is 5 of the Midwest toughest 100-mile races and 100K races that participants have to complete within 1 calendar year. And we also do a lot around trail work and giving back to the trails and just general education around trail running as a sport and ultra running as a sport. If you aren't a member yet, we'd encourage you to join us. It's $20 a year. You get discounts at all kinds of great running stores, both online and local in your community. And almost all the money that is given, it goes back to supporting those trails. We've given thousands of dollars to lots of trail organizations to help them continue to maintain some of these amazing places that we love. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining us. So tonight, I am pleased to introduce 3 amazing people. First up, we have Annie Weiss, who is over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Annie is the current FKT holder on the Ice Age Trail, female supported, the FKT holder on the North Country Trail, the Wisconsin segment, in the female supported category. You've also done Badwater 135 and a bunch of other ultra running events. So Annie, welcome tonight.
Thank you.
Then we have Alex Elizabeth, and you've made your way here to Minneapolis through Duluth and originally Ellsworth, Wisconsin. So a little bit of that Wisconsin vibe going here as well. You are big into the winter ultras, similar to myself. You've got a couple of great finishes at Arrowhead. You came in first at Tuscobee 160, which is amazing. And you've also done a lot of Ultramarathon Superior 100 and even Tahoe 200, which is an awesome event. I got to crew for that last year, and that is some beautiful, beautiful scenery there. So thank you. Welcome. And Alex is also currently the FKT holder, female supported on the Superior Hiking Trail. And until just a couple months ago, you're the former female unsupported FKT holder at Jobs Peak Loop in around Friel Peak in California. So a couple exciting things there. And then finally, we have Mr. Coree Woltering down in Ottawa, Illinois, I believe it is, correct? And Coree, no stranger to anybody who's in the trail and ultra running world, tons of top 10 finishes all over the world. Amazing personality out on the trail, always out there having fun. I've been up to Superior before and things like that. So it's always great to talk to Coree. And this last year, you took on the Ice Age Trail for the FKT for the male supported fastest known time. So Coree, thank you very much for taking some time out tonight.
Yeah, you bet.
So let's start with kind of an easy one, and feel for anybody to jump in. For those who are watching um, who maybe are unfamiliar with what an FKT is, could one of you briefly describe what is an FKT, or fastest known time, and how does it come about? Maybe Alex, if you want to give us a description.
Sure. I just want to make a quick correction too that according to the FKT site, that Brittany Peterson has the supported fastest known time. So her and Cody Lind have
And I thought
that.
they classified that as a mixed gender.
Yeah, so it's a mixed gender, but they aren't. So it
So
might
we're
be,
getting right into what the whole FKT
yeah, the
thing here.
it might just be kind of a communication thing. But she technically has the fastest supported time, even though it was a mixed gender team. So I just want to give her credit where that's due. And I know that kind of went back and forth with them a little bit about just kind of how that's classified and their mixed gender team and how they do that. But basically, it kind of comes down to I could have had the same pacer from the start, as a supported runner. So it isn't super clear on the site. As Annie knows, but that is the record that would have to be beat. So go after Brittany's time, not mine.
That's
So
what we
yeah,
were told as well. Same thing.
just
So this FKT site, for folks who are curious, what is the
yeah.
FKT site?
So that's the site that's set up that tracks all of the fastest known times, and it's basically where you set out and declare that you're going to do a route. Some people declare, I guess, others will do it and kind of post after the fact. But I think kind of best practice is to put it out there that what your intent is, what your route is, and then just kind of go for it. And for the Spear Hiking Trail, just like from my experience, there wasn't a female supported record on there. So I was going out to set an FKT. And then, so for any of those courses that follow, or any of the people that follow, you'd follow that course and you just try to beat that time.
And my understanding is from the fastest known time site is that you also have to have proof. I think there's rules around GPS data, and then there's different categories of FKTs, both supported and unsupported, and I've also heard the term self-supported as well. So I think those all have slightly different connotations, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have like basically, I think all three of us have used the spot tracker. So it's a little device that will ping where you are every 5 or 10 minutes. However, I think you could even set it up for every 1 minute or 2 minutes. So it pings, we always set it to every 10 minutes, I believe. And so it pings your location. And then you have to send that data to fkt.com. To those guys, and then they'll verify everything. And then you have to announce generally beforehand if you're supported, which means you can have crew and pacers and all that kind of stuff, or if you're unsupported, which means basically everything is going to be on your back and that's just how you're going to get through it. Or self-supported might mean that you as yourself will put out maybe some different food bags or water along the way and support yourself that way.
Awesome. So let's maybe turn to Corey here. What drew you to attempting an FKT? You've got a long history in trail and ultra running. Why'd you do an FKT this last year?
Yeah, basically everything I signed up for is being canceled because of COVID. So I was kind of bored at home and was like, let's go do something fun. And it basically came down to the fact that like I realized there probably wouldn't be very much racing this year. So I'm like, hey, I have the time, I have the fitness, so I may as well just use it.
Sure. What about for Alex and Annie? What drew you to FKTs?
The SHT FKT was really appealing to me. I went to school in Duluth and spent a lot of time on there. Have always kind of considered trying to do it the entire trail, either section hike or through hike, when I did more backpacking. But then got into trail running and then kind of thought it would be fun to try to see how fast we could do it. And had a great group of friends who are more than willing to support that effort a couple times last year. So thought it'd be fun to put down a female time and see who goes after it.
I think for me, honestly, I've been trail running since I've been running since like '08. So trail running maybe since 2011. And I just, over the last couple of years, I've just been exhausted from racing. I'm exhausted of, that type of pressure. I'm exhausted of the competition. Not that it's boring, but more so that I'm tired of showing up and feeling like I have to be in a competitive place. So for me, it was more like, how can I create something that still gives you that achievement and it still is fulfilling, but I can take people out of it and I can just, do something against a clock or do something against myself. And then you find out there's FKTs and it's like, well, that's a great idea. I can challenge myself. I'm still competing kind of against someone, but it's just in a different way. Cause I'm just exhausted. You just kind of reach a point where you're tired, and racing just has kind of lost its appeal, and FKTs just seem way more fun than racing right now.
Well, kind of on that same track then, and we'll start with you, Annie, where do you feel like trail running and FKTs maybe intersect in some ways?
Honestly, I think they can intersect in a lot of different ways. I mean, there's FKTs there's hundreds and hundreds that are already created. You can obviously, you can create your own, but I think for me, because, they intersect, because for me, trail running is not necessarily something I'm the best at in the world, but it's something that I find so joyful to be doing. When you can be out in the woods, you're out in nature, you're usually with other people. Usually means you're traveling in some way. At least for me, being in Milwaukee, there's some travel to wherever I need to go. And it's generally a place of exploration. And then to pair that with an FKT where you've removed some of that pressure, where you can, take a break, you can sit down, you can stop and take some pictures, you can enjoy your time with your crew. I think they intersect really well together in that way, because both are a time of exploration for wherever you are. There are FKTs, of course, that are 15 miles long, where you would do something very fast. And, even Coree, I don't know if this was your experience, but I kind of took a lot of heat even for 1,200 miles on Ice Age, when people would ask, well, what was your favorite part, or what segment did you enjoy most? And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders like, I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention to it. Yeah. And people would get really upset with me for not knowing the trail the same way. But since that experience, I've gone out to different segments just because, that's our trail, really, our trail system. And you start to enjoy the different parts about it. So I don't know. I think they do collide, and but I do think there is, like Alex, my husband Brian was telling me that a lot of people are upset that so many people are on the SHT right now, attempting FKTs, and why do they always have to be doing speed records and that kind of thing. And I don't know. It's something new. It's something different. It opens the door to a different level of exploration, which I think is cool.
Absolutely. And it just blows my mind, like, how upset people get when we talk about how fast we made it through the trail or whatever, because they're like, you couldn't have enjoyed it. And I'm like, but that is enjoyable to me. Like, I am doing what I like to do on a trail. And yes, I can't tell you my favorite segment, and I honestly don't remember a lot of it, but I really enjoyed the experience, though. And so I don't get why people get so upset about it, though. And I mean, like, people have been inboxing me about it, like, I can't believe you didn't enjoy the trail and blah blah blah. I'm like, come on, like, just let it be. I will go back and I will still run other sections, like, it's not like I'm one and done on it.
Right.
Yeah, the SHT is 310 miles, and all the sections were a blur for me, so I can't even imagine what you both experienced. And
A
yeah,
lot.
same thing. It's like, what's your hurry? Why are you going so fast? Stop and enjoy the trail. That's not what the trail's made for. Lots of comments like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, it's a trail. Anybody can use it. So
Right.
go out and enjoy it however you want to enjoy it.
Right.
Awesome. And kind of along that same lines, in terms of enjoyment versus getting there quickly, many of us have done trail running on these two trails. On the SHT, there's a bunch of different races that happen there between Superior 100, Spring Superior, Wild Duluth, and all those Voyagers and all that kind of stuff. And the Ice Age Trail, there's Kettle Moraine, I think, uses part of that trail. And I think there's some other ones more towards the eastern part of Wisconsin too. I think Badgerland Striders has maybe some stuff out there. So we've all kind of seen parts of this trail and run on it. And that's tough. So when you're comparing like doing an FKT where you're having to move fast and trail running where you're again having to move fast, do you feel like one is more difficult than the other, or do you feel like there's different challenges, or how would you compare the two in terms of like level of difficulty?
If I make oh, sorry, Corey, go ahead.
No, you're good. Like, it's for me, like, I don't know, they're all kind of a blur, because like when I'm racing, it's trying to move quick, and during Ice Age, it was just trying to move as quick as possible, but for many hours a day, every single day. And so I don't know, like, an FKT felt like a race, but I was at least lucky enough to be able to stop after like 50K for the day and sit down and have an actual lunch and a beer with my lunch, and then continue on for the rest of the day. So like, that's, I guess, how they're a little bit different for me.
Yeah, I feel like I learned after doing Tahoe, because I kind of tried to approach Tahoe like I would a through hike, just because it's kind of where I was at. And I feel like I was able to learn a lot about just moving through the night too, because I'm not going to be as fast as some of the people who are out there running the trail. So I knew I just had to be on my feet more. So like people can maybe cover 50 days for 3 days, where I had to cover 50 miles in the course of like a 24-hour span, where I would like take maybe a couple 20-minute naps in there instead of sleeping for a longer period overnight and things like that. So that's where that kind of, I guess, overlaps for me. But the difference is obviously you set your own schedule, and it's a lot of pressure on your crew. Those cutoffs are set by your crew and not by a race. And again, just kind of hauling everything, including you, around.
You mentioned cutoffs set by the crew. So Annie, you could share about your attempt on the SHT recently. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like there was a lot of discussions around, pace and time and how far each day and such in your attempt there.
Yeah, I mean, so with the SHT, going into it, I thought I had 6 days and 12 hours, and 2 days before I started, you find out it's 4 days and 9 hours, and it's like, okay, so we do the math on that, and it's like, well, I don't think so, but might as well go try and see what happens. So we started, and everything was on pace until, and actually the way Brittany and Cody went was northbound, and I was going southbound because I was following Alex's path and blah, the whole 9 yards. So already we were probably wrong in doing it that way. But where I felt I was on pace until I hit Lake Superior when you're along the water. And I was like, what? What is this? That type of terrain is not for me. It's really challenging, but that's where I fell behind. I think by the end of the day, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, I think, midnight, right in there. It was like we were probably 2 to 3 hours behind Brittany, I think it was. And so I'm like, all right, whatever, no big deal. And I go to bed in the morning, and you wake up at 5 and it's raining. It's 40 degrees. You just kind of look around, and there's 30-mile-an-hour winds. And I was like, boy, this just doesn't seem like the day for me to catch up. I didn't even really enjoy yesterday. I mean, it's a beautiful trail. Again, it's not a trail that I've had any sort of connection to, like with Ice Age, and you have experiences. And so for me, that was just a big deal to go out and attempt Ice Age. And so for Superior, I haven't done Superior 100. I've never been up there before. And so again, just talking with my crew, and they're like, well, if you cut down your sleep again by this many hours over the course of this time, and you make sure that your breaks are this many minutes, you should be able to get there in 4 days and 8 hours and 25 minutes or whatever it was. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not up for that. It's not that important to me from a record. And having been here, this is my first time in the Superior Trail. I'm not going to enjoy it. This is not joyful anymore, to be thinking this way. So again, then we pivoted and went somewhere else. But yeah, your crew is in charge of those cutoffs to some degree. But when you're doing something that's joyful, it becomes I can sit here for a little bit. I can take this time. My crew can just shove it right now because I'm gonna sleep. I know what what your body needs. And when you have a crew that kind of knows how you operate, they really learn to when they can push buttons and when they can't, and when they just need to, let you sleep, and that you'll be better in the morning. It becomes this kind of trust that builds between you and your crew. And my crew has been the same through Ice Age, the NCT, most of the crew for Badwater, things like that, where everyone's just kind of been there and they get it. And we both learn how to give and take and how each other operates, which I think is really helpful. It's not a new group of people, which is good.
Yeah, the SHT is a unique beast for those who haven't experienced it.
I didn't practice any, jump roping or cone jumping or I didn't do any of that. That would have been
scree field running.
It's hard to get into a flow on that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the issue overall. It was just like start, stop. And again, that's just not enjoyable. I love the constant motion of running. I also shuffle. I don't actually get my feet up. So that posed an issue quite often.
Yeah. That would be a problem.
Yep.
Well, so when you're talking about like a difficult trail like that, what type of gear differences, when thinking of trail running versus FKTs? And now you guys did these FKTs all supported. Now someone who's doing an FKT unsupported, it's a whole different ballgame because you're carrying everything on your back. But for a supported FKT, how did you pack yourselves differently than if you were going to do a long trail race on these trails? And Coree, you usually have some of the most unique wardrobe and costume setups. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so the ticks were awful in June. So that became like a huge issue for me on like day 1 and day 2. So the Speedo never came out during this FKT because I was just terrified of the ticks. But overall, I would say that I basically kind of packed like I would for like a 50-mile race, basically thinking of every day as like a 50-mile day. Because I was able to see my crew every, the longest stretch is probably like a 15-mile stretch that I didn't see them. And then other than that, I was able to see them probably every 10 miles or so. So it really was just kind of like, great, we're going out for a long run today and I'll see my crew in a couple hours.
How about for you guys, Alex?
Yeah, I would say very similar. There'd be longer stretches, but I was usually had people with me too, but basically packed my pack with the same things. So I had like a lighter layer because it was really cold. I did it actually this week last year, and it was like the city of Duluth closed down. The trail actually closed down because they had such strong storms, and it was 30s, 40s. So I always had kind of like I always had a base layer and a rain jacket. I usually didn't, for most of the hike, I wore my rain jacket and like rain pants, and always had like these little cans of Coke and like a sandwich in my pack. But yeah, I ended up packing the same, similar to Coree, that I would during like a 50-mile race or those longer races where there's like longer stretches between aid stations.
Yeah, I definitely I didn't pack very heavy. Just in a real basic vest pack, I would carry 12 to 14 ounces of water, and then I would have emergency fuel. So it would be candy or fruit roll-ups or fruit by the foot or, like an oatmeal cream pie, something just like two to 300 calories of something in my pack. My phone, the spot tracker, and then like paper toweling just in case. And but really I always made sure, because I get really spooked with animals. So I always wanted someone with me. So that was kind of like, there was always someone with me. So they would carry an extra water, again, 12 to 14 ounces. And then I would hammer food and liquids every time I saw crew, which there's a person in my crew who's a little bit more of a worry ward and about me being my husband. And so he makes a point like every 4 to 8 miles to make sure like, okay, we're good. We've made contact and here's a cheeseburger. And then we keep going. So which doesn't always help because I'll dilly dally, but I always kept a really light pack because we were stopping so frequent. And then it forced me to eat when I saw them too.
So think about gear, and for all the gearheads who are watching, let's go around and say what were the shoes they were using, and maybe the vest that you found most useful, or if you had multiple, and kind of how they held up throughout the course of it. Annie, do you want to start?
Yeah, so my pack is the Maggie Gooderell's Nathan pack, Vapor Mag. That's what it is. The Vapor Mag. In the same pack I used for Ice Age, for Badwater, for NCT. I've had that pack for a while. It does need to be replaced. But it's awesome. It's not something I would use for, like, I ran CCC. I wouldn't use it at UTMB or, for the longer distances with longer trail miles between, just because I prefer to then have more water on me. But for the FKTs, it was awesome. And then I wear ultra running shoes. So my shoe of choice is the Olympus. So for Ice Age, I used I think 6 shoes total, and 4 of them were Olympus shoes. And then for NCT, I used 2 pairs of shoes, and one of them was the Olympus. So that is my shoe of choice by far, anytime.
How about you, Corey?
Yeah, so I used the North Face like flight vest. I guess it is. It's like a 2-liter vest, and I basically use it on all my races, training, Ice Age. And then for shoes, I was in the North Face Flight Vective, which is our new shoe that comes out next January. So we were in prototypes this whole summer, testing those out. So I had a few pairs of those, and then I had some Hokas for some of the road sections also. And so, yeah, but I think I went through 14 different pairs of shoes throughout the 21 days or whatever, just because like the first 350 miles are so muddy that like nothing was drying out in that first stretch. And so I would go through 3 or 4 pairs of shoes in a day. But the awesome thing is, like, because I was rotating so much and I had darn tough Vermont socks on, like I did not get a blister until the final 7 miles. Like that was the first blister I had of the whole trail. So I think I handled that pretty well.
That's awesome. How about you, Alex?
I use the Solomon Advanced Skin 12-liter pack. Just I think it's their most recent vest that they put out. And then I run in the Ultra Timps, and similar to Corey, it was very muddy and wet. So I had, I think, 8 pairs of those that I switched, kind of rotated in and out because they would be filled with mud and filled with trail, basically. And it was just such a huge morale boost to put on a new pair of shoes. So, yeah, I cycled through quite a few of those. But that one worked great on that trail.
Even a 50K, I sometimes enjoy last aid station, just change the socks, you know? It just feels so good. Just feels so good.
Yeah.
So Annie, you had mentioned, we're getting into some of the questions now that members have asked. You had mentioned something about animals. So one of the questions we got was, what is your scariest wildlife encounter when you've been out on the trails in the FKT, when you're doing your
So
FKT?
funny. The scariest wildlife encounter is actually not a wildlife encounter like that was existed. Like it was all in my head. During Ice Age, when I had first attempted, I saw anacondas, I saw bears, I saw sharks, dinosaur. I saw everything in the world. Like my mind was making. I wasn't losing it or hallucinating. It was more just shadows and trees looked like different things. And when you spook yourself out like that, it was like, oh, it was the scariest thing in the entire world. But actual animal encounters, I've never ran into a bear. I've only seen bear prints. I've had coyotes around, I've had wolves around, which are not my favoriteest things in the world. And then the night I was running at Superior, all of a sudden you hear kind of like this moaning roar. And I was with my friend Jeannie and I said, "Oh man, what is that?" And she's like, "It's just a chainsaw. Don't worry about it." And I was like, "It's not a chainsaw." Like, so I think it was a moose, because it wasn't a bear. It wasn't a roar necessarily. It was more of a groaning moan kind of a thing. Definitely from an animal. So I want to say it was a moose and that I was close to a moose. And then that makes me feel good that I survived a, 50 yards away moose encounter. But otherwise, I've had a handful of snake encounters where, you jump to the sky and go, 20 yards around it when it's a, garden snake. But otherwise that's as close as I've come to animals thus far.
So,
Kind of sad.
so Corey, you also did the Ice Age Trail. Did you see these sharks and the anacondas and whatever else that may be lurking out there in Wisconsin, apparently?
There's a lot of alligators too. Just throwing it out there.
No, I think I must have missed that. I must have just had my head down and wasn't paying attention. But I did see 2 bears while I was out on the Ice Age Trail, which is pretty awesome. And I got hit in the shin by a baby deer. So that was also very, I was not expecting that. And there are a few snakes out there. But my scariest encounter just in general was in Leadville. And I was going down the power line climb. Well, I guess it's the descent. And there were like 4 moose just walking across the trail and they weren't moving. And like, as you're going downhill so fast, it's like, I can't stop, but they wouldn't move. And so I was afraid I was going to run into them. And luckily they moved like just in time. But that was pretty freaky because they're not necessarily the nicest animal if you run into them.
And they're big too.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a descent like towards the beginning of the race too. I mean, that if you're descending, isn't that in the first half? Yeah. So I mean, you're still moving pretty good.
But you, Alex?
I did not have any animal encounters on the Spear Hiking Trail. At night, we heard a lot of coyotes and things like that. And I definitely, toward the end, started hallucinating and seeing things that weren't there. Like, kind of my go-to hallucination seems to be moose. So there's always moose on the trail, and even like in Arrowhead in the winter stuff, I always see moose. And then you blink, and then the moose is still there. And yeah, so it was more kind of those imagined encounters, and definitely like hallucinate snakes too, like in trees and things like that.
I don't feel so bad now.
The dreaded Minnesota tree snake.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, my animal encounter happened at Tahoe at the top of the power lines climb there, and a bunch of people had gone through and they had kind of warned that there was a bear up ahead, and I went through and didn't really think of it because I had never really encountered a bear or an animal like that. So I went up there and just kind of a little bit out of it, a little bit sleepy, just kind of like waved my arms and kind of like yelled at it, and she started taking steps toward me. So I backed away probably too quickly, kind of went back and then just kind of ran off the trail. And eventually some runners came by and we played her Christmas music and got by, but yeah, not during the hikes.
So our next question that we got submitted, and I'll actually bring this right back to you, Alex, because you alluded to this a little bit before, and your FKT attempt had some struggles with this. What is the worst weather that you encountered on an FKT attempt?
Yeah, so day one of the hike last year, we had a storm that came through and kind of wiped out parts of the lake walk in Duluth and did some damage to Canal Park, and then flooded Grand Marais. So I started up north where Annie did, and the trail became just a river, basically. It was like kind of flash flooding, and there were so many trees down just kind of for the remainder of that hike too. And they actually ended up closing the section of the Duluth Trail, which is why we ended up rerouting along there. But yeah, so those storms, those fall storms are definitely the worst that I've ever had to endure. And then just that lake walk section was completely gone. The waves had come up and washed it all out. So it was kind of bushwhacking through that little bit of brush that's there and the weeds that are up there. But yeah, that whole section was underwater. So
Wow.
it was a little sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Coree, on the Ice Age Trail? In your attempt, how was the weather? Did you have any severe weather, or?
So on day day 4, maybe, it was like the remnants of the tropical storm from out east. Ended up in Wisconsin somehow. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what it was. So we had multiple days of rain. Probably 7 days of the 21 days are just rain. And we had everything from like 86 degrees for the high to like 30 something at night, I believe it was, in the northern section. And so like it was just, we had a lot of stuff. But the days that were, 65 and sunny, those are like perfect days. And they're also some of my slowest moving days, but at least the weather is good.
Annie, how about you and your attempts?
I would say the one day that stands out for me, it had to have been around day 16 or 17, right in there, of the Ice Age Trail. And I was on my home trails, so Lapham Peak and the whole, like the Waukesha trail segment. And that was the day everyone and their brother was like, oh, we'll come out, we'll cheer you on, we'll be out there. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. There'll be a lot of support and all that kind of good stuff. Not necessarily running, but just out and about and around. Well, of course, it was torrential rain. The weather was actually not terrible. I mean, the guy I was running with was just in shorts and I was in a singlet. Like, it wasn't a terribly cold rain. But I just remember coming up to Old School Road or Old Boys Road or whatever it is, and this stream of water coming towards us as you were on the Lapham Peak segment, and it was just flooding of the trail. It was so cool to be a part of it, and we just slushed our way through it, and we got to that road, and my husband had put up the trunk to the car, to the van, and we ate cheeseburgers from the gas station right there. As our hands are soaking wet, everything is just soaking wet, and then we kept on going for another, I want to say it's 3 or 4 miles, 5 miles to the end of that section. And then the rain had stopped, and that's when you've got that nice, it was like 4 p.m, and so it was just starting to turn a little bit nicer, and probably a rainbow in the sky that I didn't notice. It was that kind of weather, so it was really cool. But that was a fun rain to be in at that time. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to be in the northern part of Wisconsin on those trails with a heavy rain, but to be on my home trails was awesome.
And with day after day after day of rain, I mean, did you ever feel like you actually ever dried out? I mean, or were you just constantly stuck in that feeling of being soaking wet?
Coree, were yours consecutive days that you were in the rain?
We had maybe 2 in a row, and then we'd have a nice day, and then 2 more days of rain, and then a nice day. So that was the hardest part, because like just well, as you know, that first section of trail, when it rains, like it's just a mess.
Yeah.
And so because of that, like we were going through trail and it was just like, you know, like mid shin deep mud and standing water on top of it. And you're just like, come on.
Well, and I think too, like it doesn't even matter if it's actually raining, but more so if it has rained even in like the last month, the northern section of Wisconsin, like I'm thinking like Mondau Esker,
Yes.
like it's literally like you any step you take, you might be going down to your hip in mud, like and you're in dirty water that has like that film on it. So like I totally get how you went through so many pairs of shoes, because it is just wet, not necessarily coming from the sky, but like there's this constant wetness from the knee down. It's just, yeah, it can be really gross depending on the time of year up there.
Absolutely.
If you're used to that, I think that you can hike the Superior Hiking Trail next spring.
It's okay. Pass.
So one of the questions submitted is actually directed specifically to Coree. Can you talk at all about your Eco Challenge experience, and in kind of in relation to the difficulties of someone like doing the FKT or your big events? I mean, how did that compare?
Yeah, Eco Challenge, it was also extremely wet. Like that was the first time I think that I've ever just been wet for like a week at a time. Like nothing ever dries out there, because you start out on the water and then you're on more water and then you're on water some more. And then when you finally get onto the mountain bikes, you're walking through flooded trails and, you know, mid-calf deep mud. And you're not even riding your mountain bike, but you're pushing it or carrying it. And so that was rough. It was one of those things where when we got off of, so first we started out sailing, but there's no wind. So you paddled for like 50 miles, and then you had this 20-kilometer trek, and then you sailed back to the main island. And once you were done with the sailing section, you got on stand-up paddleboards, and you were on the stand-up paddleboards for 40 kilometers. And you had to navigate this river basically at night, and there's a storm that was coming in, so there ended up being 2 to 3 foot waves on the ocean as you had to like go around this little peninsula and then get onto the river. And so you're just watching people just fall off their paddleboards into the ocean, and we're like, we can't help you. So it was really funny. But yeah, paddled 40 kilometers there, and then you get on your mountain bikes again, and it's like, oh, like this one's really going to be exciting now because it looks like we're going to be on a road, but the road goes from like pavement to dirt, and then it just turns into this mud fest again. And we were up in the mountains at that point, and I think the highest point is like 3,200 feet or something in Fiji. But all of a sudden, you know, it may be 80 degrees at sea level, and it might only be 45 at 3,200 feet. So now you're cold, wet, and muddy. And so that can be rough. The Billy is still my least favorite part of that, when we had to make the bamboo rafts, and then it was like a 30-kilometer paddle on the bamboo raft. And I did not enjoy that at all. I still have nightmares about it, actually. And yeah, it was definitely tough, but it was a good lesson in just doing like the same monotonous thing over and over and over, and just learning to turn your brain off and just get through it. Because like we were just moving around the clock for the 5 or 6 days or whatever. And so I think that really did help when it came to like the Ice Age Trail, just because I did have that experience of just doing the same thing over and over and over, on very little food and very little sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So our final question of the evening that was submitted and actually we'll start with Annie on this one, since there's probably some stuff here fresh in your mind around this. What keeps you emotionally engaged and willing to see the attempt through when the seemingly insurmountable issues crop up?
That's a great, fully loaded question. So for me, honestly, I have a really, really hard time when I commit to doing something that is meaningful to me. I have a really hard time like not finishing it. So there was a race I did this summer, and actually it was one of my husband's goal races, and you couldn't crew very much for it. It's the Beaverhead 100, goes through the Beaverhead Mountains, and I never looked at it. I was like, well, I'll just sign up, then I'll just, I'll be out there, and if you can't have any crew. And I by mile, I don't know, halfway through 30, 35, I was walking. I was like, this is hard. There's scree rock, so it was like a mile per hour for me. Cause for me, that's just paralyzing. I just have a fear of heights. So being in the mountains I love being in the Leadville Mountains, but being, where you're on scree rock is really scary to me. And I think, I had thought, I've got 45 minutes to get to this aid station. Or I made it to the final cutoff within 45 minutes. And I thought, well, I could just drop here. And then I thought, I've gone through hell to get this far, and I have 13 or whatever miles left. Like, I'm going to finish this because I set out to do this, and it's really hard. And I don't ever want to think about it again and think, well, I probably could have done it. And so I ended up like I think I was the 8th person from the last to spot to finish, and it was literally like the worst 100K time of my life, but it was such a proud moment, because it was like, okay, I can do this, and place and all of that stuff, put that all aside, it doesn't matter. Like, you can challenge yourself to do anything. You just have to be able to tell yourself that when you're doing it, it's something that you can actually do. You can't convince yourself like, no, this isn't for me. I can't do this right now. I don't have the ability. And I always try to think about, in a week or two, when everything is past, what am I going to think about this? Am I going to think I could have done, better with my time? Am I going to think, well, I could have finished that, or I could have ran a little faster. I could have done this better. And if I know that I'm going to say that to myself, I have to see it through. And that was Ice Age the first time. In 2017, I had a bacterial, basically like cellulitis through my legs, or some version of a bacterial infection, similar to what cellulitis looks like. And I had to stop. I didn't want to, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And so for, over a year, that hung on my shoulders, just like, man, that was so important to me. It was important for the Midwest running community. It's important for, all of the women who can do exceptional things out there, that I go and I finish that, because, that's what I set out to do. And it's something that I know I can do. And I just remind myself of that. Like, I have to finish things. So for me, that's really where, especially in an FKT, I find my motivation. Like, I can break now for 10 extra minutes, or I can finish 10 extra minutes sooner than I plan to, like, I can just keep going. I can hammer through. And I use that mentality a lot in racing, to just keep going, because a finish line feels so good. So you'll always see me finish unless there's a medical issue, or I'm just simply not finding any joy whatsoever in what I'm doing. So that's really where it stands for me.
How about you, Corey?
Yeah. I just like to take on these adventures, because I like to know how things feel. Like, that's the most simple thing for me. Like, I didn't know what it felt like to run, over 1,000 miles. So I'm like, there's only one way to find out. Like, I signed up for my first 100 miler, because I was coaching an athlete that was doing a 100 miler, but I had never done one. So I was like, okay, like, I should probably do one. And so, I guess it's just the exploration and figuring out how things feel is what really kind of keeps me going. And then at this point, it's also become, with running for the North Face and being, an openly gay person of color, in the trail community, just being that role model for kids and other people of color to get out and try to do something different. Because I honestly, this is only maybe my 5th year of trail running, I guess. But I got into trail running because a friend needed a pacer at the Leadville 100. And had that friend not been like, hey, can you pace me at Leadville? Like, I honestly would never have even thought about trail running. So so I'm just hoping, that I can kind of be that person for someone. And I guess that's also what keeps me going when things just really get tough out there.
Awesome. Alex?
Yeah, so kind of similar to both what Annie and Corey are saying. I think for me, it was putting that time out there for having a female time, because it was all males who had gone before and put times up there, but there wasn't any female representation. And also, as a person of color in the trail running community, I wanted to add a little diversity to it from that standpoint too. And kind of when it got tough during I guess both attempts last year, the main thing for me was just wanting to finish it and having that time up there and being someone who, if I say I'm going to do something, follow through, and then thinking through all of the preparation and all of the things that we've gone through leading up to that point, and all the support that I've received from people leading up to that point, but also during. When you have a crew there who has given up their entire week plus, who took their whole week off work to sit sleep deprived, eating junk food out of the back of your car with you, waiting in the middle of the night when it's like 30 degrees and you're literally doing like 1 hour miles. Because they're so cold, just trying to walk with you, and then you're laying on the ground, and then they're trying to get you to keep going, and then they're just sitting there and they're so excited to see you come in, and they're so energized and so just happy to be there, like genuinely happy to be there and want to be there. It helps so much. When the trail closed, I had reached that point, I think it was just like over 205 miles, which is the longest I'd ever gone before. And I was super excited. And then we found out at the next stop that the Duluth section of trail had closed down. And I was like, well, what's the point? And this is just going to be, it probably won't count. And we're going to have to reroute or go against everything and stay on the trail, which wasn't an option, obviously. And they immediately just kind of went to work, put together a new plan, and they're like, we're going to stay here if you want to finish, and we'll do it in our own way, and it'll count in all the ways that matter. I remember Helen Scotch made a comment, and because I was like, I have no idea if this is going to count, but we're out here and we're having a good time and we're together. And what other time do you get to just spend 6 days? It was supposed to be less than 6 days, but it ended up being 6+ days with some of your closest friends, and they're just there to support you moving through the woods. And it's a pretty incredible experience to have that, and to have that kind of support, and to be able to do something like that. So yeah, for me, it was just like, let's just make this our own adventure, and these major severe weather events and storms aren't going to be anything that go away. So maybe this is something that we need to start adapting and being flexible and just kind of making our own way through it. So huge shout out to my crew. They were incredible and put up with a lot of crap from me.
That's wonderful. Well, before we go, first I want to say thank you very much to all of you for spending some time with me tonight to talk about all of this. Is there anything else you would like to share or add, things you have upcoming that you want to share or talk about, or anything else that you want to put out there?
I just want to say good luck to Alex doing Arrowhead, because like we were talking about before, doing winter stuff is not my gig. I'll be hibernating. I mean, I still run outside, but I'm not doing any winter racing. And I think doing winter racing is a really, really cool thing. And I wish I was into it a bit more. So I wish you good luck at that, because that's awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who has watched this tonight. Thank you so much for supporting trails in the Upper Midwest. And we've got some wonderful people here, and we're grateful to have them as part of our community, just as we're grateful that you're joined us as part of our community. And so from all of us here at UMTR, We hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.